The rain fell like needles against my skin, each drop a cold reminder of how thoroughly I had been cast out. My threadbare coat, once a symbol of belonging to the Silvertree Pack, now hung like a sad flag of surrender from my shivering shoulders. The forest around me moaned with the approaching storm, branches bending and creaking as though even they wished to distance themselves from me. Rejected. The word tasted bitter in my mouth, sharper than the hunger that had been my constant companion for 3 days now. You are no longer welcome among us, Elderthorn had announced, his voice carrying across the clearing where the entire pack had gathered to witness my shame. Your bloodline is weak. You bring no strength to our pack. You are defective. Defective. Because in a world where hierarchy was everything, I was nothing. An Omega with no special abilities, no fighting prowess, nothing to contribute to a pack that valued only strength and dominance. My light blonde hair, so different from the rich dark tones of most pack members, was just another marker of my otherness. Another reason they stared through me as though I were a ghost. I stumbled through the undergrowth, guided only by the faint scent of water. My grandmother had taught me to find shelter during storms by following water to low ground. The tallest trees catch the lightning, she would whisper, pressing her silver pendant into my palm. The same pendant that now hung around my neck, my only inheritance and last connection to someone who had loved me. Trust your instincts, she'd said before she died. They're stronger than you know. What instinct had led me here, though? To this ravine where the smell of wolf was thick in the air despite the coming rain? Not my pack, no, not anymore, but something wild and desperate, something dangerous. I froze when I heard the first growl. The sound came from a small cave entrance, half hidden by fallen logs and tangled vines. My heart thundered in my chest, but some force pulled me forward. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the knowledge that death by wolf was quicker than death by starvation and exposure. Or perhaps it was the strange, hollow whimpering that followed the growl, a sound I recognized all too well. Hunger, pain, desperation. I crept closer, my body tense with each step. The entrance was narrow, but I was small. Another trait my former pack had despised. I slipped inside, letting my eyes adjust to the dimness. What I saw made my breath catch. 3 wolves, their ribs visible beneath matted fur, lay huddled together for warmth. One raised its head weakly, amber eyes locking onto mine with a mixture of threat and exhaustion. These weren't pack wolves. They were too wild, too thin. Rogues, or perhaps wolves separated from their pack during one of the territorial wars that had ravaged our region. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt my chest tighten with recognition. Outcasts, like me. I have nothing, I whispered, slowly removing my bag, but I can share what little there is. The pack had allowed me to keep my foraging tools, a small mercy born not of kindness but indifference. I'd managed to gather some roots and berries during my exile, barely enough to keep myself alive. Now I spread my meager findings on the ground before the wolves. The largest one, a gray male with a scar across his muzzle, growled again, but didn't move. The smallest, a tawny female, whimpered and inched forward, hunger overriding caution. It's okay, I murmured, backing away to give them space. I know what it's like when no one wants you. Outside, thunder cracked like a whip across the sky. The storm had arrived in full force, trapping us all in this moment of strange communion. I sank to the ground, my back against the cool stone wall, and watched as the wolves cautiously consumed my offering. The gray wolf's eyes never left me, even as he finally gave in to hunger and ate his share. There was something unnerving in that gaze, an intelligence that seemed to peer into places I kept hidden from everyone, including myself. When they finished, I expected them to turn on me, their next available meal. Instead, the tawny female approached, her steps hesitant, and lay down beside me. Her body was warm against my cold limbs. "You're welcome," I whispered, daring to place a trembling hand on her coarse fur. The gray wolf watched this interaction with those piercing eyes, and for a moment, I could have sworn something shifted in his gaze. A recognition, an assessment being recalculated. The third wolf, a younger male with a dark patch over one eye, had already curled up to sleep, apparently deciding I wasn't a threat. The storm outside intensified, wind howling through the trees like a mourning mother. In this small cave, with these starving creatures who had accepted what I offered without judgment, I felt the first moment of peace since my rejection. I must have dozed, lulled by exhaustion and the surprising warmth of the wolves around me. Dreams came in fragments, running through forests I'd never seen, hunting alongside shadows with amber eyes, and always, always a presence behind me. Something powerful, something that wanted me. I woke to silence. The storm had passed, and pale morning light filtered through the cave entrance. The wolves were gone, leaving only paw prints in the soft earth and the lingering scent of wild things. For a moment, I felt a strange sense of loss, then practicality took over. I needed to move on, find a human settlement perhaps, where my kind were sometimes tolerated as servants or laborers. The wolflands were no longer safe for me. I gathered my few possessions and stepped out into the forest. The storm had transformed everything. Branches lay scattered across the ground, and new streams carved paths where there had been none before. The air felt clean, renewed. That's when I noticed the tracks. Wolf tracks, larger than any I'd seen before, circling the cave entrance. These didn't belong to my companions from the night. These were the prints of something much bigger. A cold shiver ran down my spine. There was only one wolf who left marks like that. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories. A near-mythical figure whose pack controlled the richest hunting grounds, and whose cruelty was legendary among all wolfkind. What was he doing this far from his stronghold? I backed away from the tracks, my instinct screaming danger. I needed to leave now. I'd barely made it 10 steps when the forest around me went silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the thundering of my own heart in my ears. He emerged from between two ancient oaks, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The stories hadn't done him justice. In human form, the Alpha King stood nearly 7 feet tall, his body a testament to power and dominance. His hair was the color of midnight, falling in waves to broad shoulders. His face might have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and unforgiving lines. But it was his eyes that held me frozen in place, golden as harvest moons and just as cold and distant. He wore only leather breeches and an open vest that displayed the intricate tattoos covering his chest and arms, symbols of battles won and enemies destroyed. "Little Omega," his voice rolled like distant thunder, "do you know what you did last night?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My grandmother's pendant seemed to burn against my skin, her voice in my memory urging me to stand tall even when afraid. "No," I finally managed, my voice embarrassingly small. His lips curved into something too predatory to be called a smile. "You fed my scouts, the ones I sent ahead to test the loyalty of the packs in these territories." He took a step closer, and it took everything I had not to flinch away. They were under orders to accept no help, to report any who offered it. My blood turned to ice. Had I inadvertently entangled myself in pack politics? Was this to be my end, after all? "I didn't know," I whispered. "Clearly." Another step closer. "What is your name, little one?" "Eleanor," I answered, surprising myself with the truth when a lie might have been safer. "Eleanor," he repeated, and something about the way my name sounded in his mouth made my heart stutter. And why would an Omega with no pack to her name risk feeding 3 dangerous wolves during a storm? The question hung between us, heavy with implication. How did he know I had no pack? Had he been watching me even before last night? "They were hungry," I said simply, because it was the truth. I know what that feels like. Something flickered in those golden eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. He circled me slowly, and I fought the urge to turn, to keep him in my sight. This was a predator assessing prey, and any sudden movement would only trigger the chase. "The Silvertree pack cast you out," he stated, rather than asked, "for weakness. I flinched at the accuracy of his words. Yes. He completed his circle, coming to stand before me again. This close, I could see the faint scars that marked his face. Testament to battles fought and won. There was no softness in him, nothing that hinted at mercy. Weakness, he mused, reaching out with one large hand to lift my chin, forcing my eyes to meet his. Yet you walked into a cave of starving wolves and shared what little you had. His thumb brushed across my lower lip, so gently it might have been my imagination. Interesting definition of weakness. My heart was a wild thing in my chest. No one had ever touched me with such casual possession before. In my former pack, I had been invisible, untouchable in my worthlessness. What? My voice broke, and I swallowed hard. What happens now? The Alpha King's gaze traveled over my face, down to the pendant at my throat, and back up again. Something changed in his expression. A decision made. Now, little Eleanor, he said, his voice dropping to a rumble that I felt in my very bones. You come with me. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a command. It was simply a statement of what would be. And as the forest whispered around us, as the morning light caught in his raven hair and turned his eyes to molten gold, I knew with terrifying certainty that my life had just irrevocably changed. I can't go with you. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, born of panic rather than courage. His eyebrows rose fractionally, the only indication that my refusal had surprised him. No one refused the Alpha King. Everyone knew the stories. Those who defied him didn't live long enough to regret it. Can't? He repeated, the word dangerously soft. Or won't. I took a shaky breath. Both. I'm not pack material. That's been made abundantly clear. My fingers instinctively touched the ragged edge where my pack insignia had been torn from my coat. And your territories are days from here. You think I traveled alone? Something like amusement flickered in his golden eyes. As if summoned by his words, shapes materialized from the forest. Wolves in human form, each bearing the distinctive silver armbands of the Northern Territory Elite Guard. I counted 6 of them, their faces impassive as stone as they formed a loose circle around us. My heart sank. There would be no escaping this. Please, I whispered, hating the tremor in my voice. I've done nothing wrong. No, you haven't. The Alpha King's tone softened fractionally. That's precisely why you're coming with me. Before I could respond, he turned to his guards. Prepare to move out. The little Omega will ride with me. Ride? I barely had time to wonder before he swept me up into his arms with insulting ease, carrying me through the trees to where several horses waited. I'd never ridden before, another luxury not afforded to Omegas in my former pack, where we walked while Alphas and Betas rode. He placed me atop a massive black stallion before mounting behind me, his chest a wall of heat against my back. His arms came around me to take the reins, effectively caging me against him. Hold tight, he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. It's a long journey. The forest blurred around us as we rode, the Alpha King setting a pace that had my fingers digging into the saddle's pommel. Questions burned in my throat, but fear kept them trapped behind clenched teeth. What did he want with me? Why would the ruler of the Northern Territories concern himself with a cast-off Omega? We rode until midday, stopping only when we reached a small clearing beside a stream. One of the guards immediately began preparing food, while others tended the horses. I stood awkwardly to one side, painfully aware of how out of place I was among these powerful wolves. The Alpha King approached, offering a water skin. Drink, he said. You're pale. I accepted it with shaking hands, the cool water a blessed relief for my parched throat. Thank you, I managed, the words feeling strange on my tongue. I wasn't accustomed to thanking Alphas. In my experience, they expected gratitude but rarely acknowledged it. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You're afraid of me. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Everyone fears you. Not everyone fed my wolves during a storm. He took back the water skin, his fingers brushing mine. Tell me about the Silvertree Pack. The request caught me off guard. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with why they cast you out. I looked down at my worn boots, shame burning my cheeks. I told you. I'm defective. His tone left no room for evasion. I can't shift properly. The admission tore from me like a physical wound. I can only manage a partial transformation. It's shameful. A sign of weak bloodlines, I forced myself to meet his eyes, bracing for disgust or mockery. Instead, his expression remained neutral. And this was enough for them to exile you? It was everything, I said, memories rising unbidden. An Omega who can't even shift properly is worse than useless. I couldn't hunt, couldn't protect, I swallowed hard. I couldn't contribute. The pack has been struggling. Bad winters, territorial disputes. They needed every member to be strong. So they discarded you. His voice had gone dangerously quiet. During the worst storm of the season. They gave me 3 days head start, I said, as though that somehow justified it. It was merciful by their standards. Something dark flashed across his face. Merciful, he repeated, the word like broken glass. Before I could respond, he turned away, calling orders to his guards. Within minutes we were moving again, pushing harder than before. I could feel tension radiating from the Alpha King's body, sense something simmering beneath his controlled exterior. The guards, too, seemed more alert, exchanging glances whose meaning I couldn't decipher. We rode through the afternoon and into evening, the landscape gradually changing around us. The familiar mixed forests of my territory gave way to denser pine woods, the air growing cooler and sharper with altitude. We were heading north, into the mountains that marked the boundary of the Alpha King's domain. When we finally stopped for the night, my body was one massive ache. I slid from the horse on trembling legs, only the Alpha King's quick reflexes preventing me from collapsing entirely. First time riding, he observed, steadying me with hands that engulfed my shoulders. I nodded, too exhausted for words. Set up camp, he commanded his guards. Double watch tonight. We're still in disputed territory. One of the guards, a lean woman with sharp eyes and a scar bisecting her left eyebrow, approached. Sire, there's a storm moving in from the north. Should we seek better shelter? The Alpha King's gaze lifted to the darkening sky. No, we push through at first light. His hand remained on my shoulder, the weight of it both reassuring and terrifying. See to it that Eleanor has warm clothes for the mountain pass. The guard's eyes widened slightly at his use of my name, but she nodded and retreated. Come, he said, guiding me toward where the others were establishing camp with practiced efficiency. You need to eat. A fire was already blazing, its warmth drawing me like a moth to flame. I sank down gratefully, holding my hands out to the heat. The Alpha King settled beside me, his massive frame dwarfing mine. You know my name, I said quietly. But I don't know yours. The stories just call you the Alpha King. Something that might have been amusement softened his stern features. The stories would have you believe I bathe in the blood of my enemies and eat the hearts of those who betray me. I swallowed hard. Don't you? A startled laugh escaped him, a rich, deep sound that seemed to surprise even him. The guards nearby froze momentarily, shooting curious glances our way before resuming their tasks. Only on special occasions, he said, and it took me a heartbeat to realize he was joking. My name is Raven. A fitting name for a monster, wouldn't you say? Raven. It suited him. Dark and mysterious, an omen of things both feared and revered. Why are you doing this? I asked, the question that had been burning inside me all day finally breaking free. Why take me? He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was low, meant only for my ears. Because you showed compassion when you had every reason not to. Because you gave when you had nothing left to give. His golden eyes reflected the firelight, turning them into living flames. Such traits are rare in our world, little Omega. Rarer still in one who has been shown no compassion in return. Food arrived then. A simple stew that nonetheless smelled better than anything I'd eaten in weeks. My stomach growled embarrassingly loud. Eat, Raven encouraged, accepting his own bowl with a nod of thanks to the guard who delivered it. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware of his eyes on me. The other guards kept their distance, creating an illusion of privacy that I suspected was deliberate. Tomorrow, we cross into my territories, he said when I'd finished. You should know what that means. I set my empty bowl aside, wariness returning. What does it mean? It means you'll be under my protection. His gaze was intense, holding mine captive. No one will harm you. No one will call you defective or worthless. But they will watch you. Curious about the Omega who caught their king's attention, my pulse quickened. I don't understand what you want from me. Neither do I, he admitted, the candid response catching me off guard. Not entirely, but I know what I saw last night. An Omega with no reason to help anyone, sharing her last meal with strange wolves during a storm. He leaned closer, his scent enveloping me, pine and wood smoke and something uniquely him. Do you know how rare that is, Eleanor? True kindness without expectation of reward. Before I could form a response, he stood in one fluid motion. Rest. Dawn comes early, and the mountain pass is treacherous. One of the female guards showed me to a small tent that had been erected at the edge of camp. Inside was a bedroll that looked more comfortable than anything I'd slept on in days, along with a pile of furs and a clean set of clothes. The king said you would need these, she said, gesturing to a pair of sturdy boots beside the bedroll. Your current ones won't survive the mountain crossing. I stared at the offerings, overwhelmed. Thank you. Vera, she supplied, her expression softening slightly. I'm captain of the king's personal guard. Why is he doing this? I couldn't help asking. Surely he has more important matters than one stray Omega. Vera studied me for a long moment. The king does nothing without purpose, she said finally, but I haven't seen him this interested in anything for a very long time. She stepped back toward the tent entrance. Rest well, Eleanor. Tomorrow will test us all. Left alone, I changed into the provided clothes. Simple but well made. Far finer than anything I'd owned before. The clean fabric against my skin felt like a luxury I'd forgotten existed. I lay down on the bedroll, pulling furs around me against the growing chill. Outside, I could hear the murmur of voices, the occasional burst of laughter. The sounds of a pack comfortable with one another. It made my chest ache with a longing I couldn't name. Sleep eluded me, my mind racing with the day's events. Why had Raven, the Alpha King whose name was whispered in fear, taken such interest in me? What awaited me in the Northern Territories? Would I find another home only to be rejected again when my defects became apparent? I clutched my grandmother's pendant, her words echoing in my memory. Trust your instincts. They're stronger than you know. My instincts had led me into that cave during the storm. They had pushed me to share my meager provisions with wolves who might have killed me. And now they whispered that despite all logic and reason, despite the fear that still twisted in my gut, I was heading toward something important. Something that might change everything. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the distant howl of wolves, wild ones, calling to the moon that had risen full and bright above the trees. In the nearby tent, I heard Raven shift, perhaps listening to the same primal song. For the first time since my exile, I allowed myself to hope. Not for acceptance or belonging. Those dreams seemed too fragile, too easily shattered. No. I hoped simply for survival, for the strength to face whatever lay ahead. For the courage to be seen, truly seen, without shame. With that modest hope wrapped around me like the furs, I finally drifted into sleep. Morning arrived with biting cold, and a sky heavy with the promise of snow. I emerged from my tent to find the camp already in motion, guards dismantling shelters and preparing horses with brisk efficiency. Raven stood at the edge of the clearing, deep in conversation with Vera. The morning light caught in his dark hair, highlighting streaks of silver I hadn't noticed before. He turned as if sensing my presence, golden eyes finding mine across the distance. Eleanor, he called, motioning me forward. Come, eat quickly. We need to reach the pass before the weather turns. A guard handed me a portion of dried meat and bread as I approached. I accepted it gratefully, aware of how precious food was on a journey like this. Did you sleep well? Raven asked, his tone casual but his gaze assessing. Yes, thank you. The lie came easily. No need to admit how his proximity had kept me awake, my mind spinning with questions. He nodded, seemingly satisfied. The mountain pass can be treacherous this time of year. Stay close to me. Within minutes we were mounted and moving, Raven once again positioning me before him on his stallion. As we climbed higher into the mountains, the forest thinned, giving way to rocky terrain, and spectacular views that might have taken my breath away under different circumstances. "There," Raven said, his voice close to my ear as he pointed toward a jagged opening between two towering peaks. "The gateway to the north, the entrance to my territories." The pass looked ominous, clouds swirling around the peaks like restless spirits. A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold. "Once we cross, we'll be able to travel faster," he continued. "My patrols keep the main roads clear." "How large are your territories?" I asked, trying to focus on something other than the warmth of his chest against my back. 3 days' ride from the gateway to the Winter Palace," he replied. "Another 2 to the summer hunting grounds. The northern territories encompass 5 mountain ranges and the valleys between them." His lands were vast, far larger than I'd imagined. The Silvertree Pack had controlled a territory that could be crossed in half a day. As we approached the gateway, the wind picked up, bringing with it the first flakes of snow. The guards tightened formation around us, their faces grim with concentration. "The pass narrows ahead," Raven warned. "The footing is treacherous. Hold tight." I gripped the pommel as our mount carefully picked its way between towering walls of stone. The path grew so narrow at points that our legs nearly brushed the rock face. Below us, a sheer drop fell away into swirling mist that concealed how far one might fall before meeting the jagged rocks below. The snowfall intensified, thick flakes stinging my cheeks and clinging to my eyelashes. Raven's arm tightened around my waist, pulling me more securely against him. "Not much further," he murmured, though whether he was reassuring me or himself I couldn't tell. A sharp crack split the air, a sound like breaking ice but magnified tenfold. The guards shouted warnings, spurring their mounts forward. "Avalanche!" Vera's voice carried above the wind. "Move!" Raven didn't hesitate. He dug his heels into the stallion's sides, and we surged forward, the horse somehow finding purchase on the treacherous path. Behind us, I heard the terrifying rumble of snow and rock giving way. We burst through the narrowest part of the pass, just as the avalanche crashed down, the ground shaking beneath our horses' hooves. When the dust and snow settled, the path behind us was completely blocked. Raven pulled the stallion to a halt, turning to assess the situation. "Report," he commanded. Vera and 4 other guards emerged from the swirling snow, their faces tense but uninjured. "2 missing," she replied. "Talon and Soren were bringing up the rear." Raven's expression hardened. "Search for survivors," he ordered, sliding from the saddle and lifting me down beside him. "Stay here," he told me, his tone brooking no argument. I watched as he and the guards approached the wall of debris, calling out for their missing comrades. The snow continued to fall, heavier now, obscuring my view of their efforts. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly feeling very alone despite the activity nearby. These wolves were a unit, a true pack that functioned seamlessly together. Their concern for their missing members was palpable, a stark contrast to my former pack who had cast me out without a second thought. A muffled shout drew my attention. "Here! I found Talon!" The guards converged on a spot near the edge of the fallen snow, digging frantically. I moved closer, despite Raven's instruction to stay put, some instinct pulling me forward. They pulled a male guard from the snow, his face bloody and one leg bent at an unnatural angle. He was conscious but barely, his breathing shallow and pained. "Soren?" he managed between gritted teeth. Vera shook her head, still searching. I knelt beside the injured guard, my hands hovering uncertainly. In my former pack, Omegas were trained in basic healing, one of the few useful tasks we were permitted to perform. "May I?" I asked Vera, who looked to Raven for permission. He hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Do what you can." I examined Talon carefully, assessing his injuries with gentle hands. "His leg is broken," I reported, "and he may have internal injuries. He needs proper care soon." "The nearest outpost is half a day's ride," Vera said grimly. "He won't make it that far without stabilizing the leg," I said, surprising myself with my own certainty. I looked up at Raven. "I need branches for splints and something to bind them." He nodded to 2 of the guards, who immediately moved to obey. To Vera, he said, "Continue searching for Soren." While the guards gathered what I needed, I spoke softly to Talon, trying to keep him conscious and calm. "This will hurt," I warned him as I prepared to set the bone. "But you're strong. You'll heal. His eyes, clouded with pain, searched my face. You're the Omega, from the south. Yes, I confirmed, positioning my hands on his leg. Now brace yourself. With a quick, practiced motion, I realigned the bone. Talon's roar of pain echoed off the mountainside, but he didn't fight me. I worked quickly after that, securing the makeshift splints and binding them tightly with strips of cloth torn from a guard's spare shirt. This will hold until we reach help, I told him, wiping sweat from my brow despite the cold. Raven had watched my work in silence, his expression unreadable. Now he crouched beside me. Where did you learn this? My grandmother was a healer, I explained, checking Talon's pulse. She taught me before she died. It was the only skill my former pack found valuable enough to let me practice. Something flashed in Raven's eyes. Anger, perhaps, though not directed at me. Before he could respond, Vera returned, her expression grim. No sign of Soren, she reported. And the snow's getting worse. If we don't move now, we risk being trapped on this side of the pass. Raven stood, decision made. We proceed to the outpost. Talon rides with Kale. Vera, you and Mira take point. I want us there before nightfall. He turned to me, his voice softening slightly. You did well, little Omega. The unexpected praise warmed something inside me. A feeling so foreign I almost didn't recognize it as pride. We set off again, our pace slower now to accommodate Talon's injuries. The landscape on this side of the gateway was starkly beautiful, rugged mountains giving way to forests of towering pine and spruce, their branches heavy with snow. As we descended into a wide valley, I began to see signs of civilization, cleared paths, the occasional marker post, and finally smoke rising from what appeared to be a substantial settlement. The northern outpost, Raven explained as we approached. The first defense of my territories, the outpost was far more than I'd expected. A walled compound housing what looked like several hundred people, with watchtowers and a massive gate flanked by guards bearing the same silver armbands as Raven's escort. Our arrival caused an immediate stir. Guards snapped to attention, wolves in both human and shifted form stopping to stare as we passed. Word of who we were, or more accurately, who Raven was, seemed to spread like wildfire ahead of us. We rode directly to what appeared to be an infirmary, where Talon was quickly transferred to the care of actual healers. Only then did Raven finally relax, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. We'll rest here tonight, he announced. The storm will pass by morning. A tall, severe-looking woman approached, bowing deeply to Raven. My king, we weren't expecting you. Quarters are being prepared as we speak. Thank you, Commander, Raven replied. This is Eleanor. She'll be staying in my quarters. My head snapped up at his words, heat flooding my cheeks. The commander's eyebrows rose fractionally, but she merely bowed again. Of course. I'll see to it personally. As she walked away, I hissed. Your quarters? A faint smile touched his lips. I assure you, little Omega, my intentions are honorable, but news of your arrival will spread quickly, and there are those who might be curious about you. You'll be safest with me. Before I could argue further, we were escorted to a large building in the center of the compound. Inside was far more luxurious than the rugged exterior suggested. Warm wooden floors covered with thick rugs, walls hung with tapestries depicting hunts and battles, and a massive fireplace already ablaze with a welcoming fire. Rest, Raven said, gesturing to a door that presumably led to a bedroom. I have matters to attend to. Food will be brought shortly. Left alone, I explored the quarters cautiously. The bedroom was dominated by an enormous bed piled high with furs, but it was the adjoining bathing chamber that made me pause in wonder. A large stone tub was filled with steaming water, scented oils arranged neatly alongside it. After days of travel, the temptation was too great to resist. I shed my dirty clothes and slipped into the water, a moan of pleasure escaping me as the heat enveloped my aching body. I scrubbed away the grime of the journey, watching the water darken around me. Clean for the first time in days, I wrapped myself in the soft linen towel provided and returned to the bedroom to find fresh clothes laid out on the bed. Simple but well-made garments in deep blue that complemented my fair coloring. As I dressed, my mind returned to the events of the day. I had proven useful, had perhaps even saved Talon's life with my basic healing skills. The look in Raven's eyes when he'd said I'd done well, it had stirred something in me, a hunger for more of that approval. It was dangerous to want such things, I reminded myself. I was here on his whim, and whims changed. Whatever fascination I held for the Alpha King would fade once he truly understood my defects. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. A young woman entered carrying a tray laden with food, far more than I could possibly eat alone. "The king asked that you eat, my lady," she said, setting the tray on a small table. "He will join you shortly." My lady? The title felt strange, uncomfortable. I'm just an Omega," I corrected her gently. She looked confused. "But the king himself brought you here. You wear his colors." She gestured to my blue garments. "You must be very special." Before I could form a response, she bowed and retreated, leaving me staring after her in bewilderment. Special? Me? The very notion was absurd, and yet Raven had brought me here, had shown concern for my welfare, had sought my help with Talon's injuries rather than dismissing me. I picked at the food, my appetite warring with the anxiety churning in my stomach. What happened when we reached our final destination? What role could a defective Omega possibly play in the court of the Alpha King? Outside, the snowstorm howled, matching the turmoil of my thoughts. Tomorrow we would continue our journey to the Winter Palace, to whatever fate awaited me there. For tonight, at least, I was warm, fed, and safe. I touched my grandmother's pendant, drawing comfort from its familiar weight. "Trust your instincts," I whispered to myself. "They're stronger than you know." Raven returned as I was finishing my meal, snow dusting his dark hair and shoulders. He shrugged off his heavy cloak, hanging it by the fire to dry. "The storm is worsening," he announced, helping himself to what remained of the food. "We'll stay an extra day." I nodded, unsure how to respond. The prospect of spending more time alone with him both thrilled and terrified me. "Talon will recover," he continued, his golden eyes finding mine. "The healers say your quick action likely saved his leg. He asked to thank you personally tomorrow." "I only did what anyone would have done," I murmured, uncomfortable with praise. Raven's laugh was short and without humor. "No, Eleanor. What you did is precisely what most would not have done." He studied me with that unnerving intensity that seemed to pierce through all my defenses. Most wolves, especially those with no pack connection to Talon, would have left him to the healers and thought no more of it. You acted with both skill and compassion. I looked away, unable to bear the weight of his gaze. "In my former pack, it was expected that Omegas would serve as helpers to the true healers, and yet you clearly learned more than the basics," he observed, leaning back in his chair. "Your grandmother taught you well." The mention of my grandmother sent a pang through my chest. "She believed everyone had value," I said softly. "Even defective Omegas like me." Raven was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, grown softer but somehow more intense. "Tell me about this defect that was so terrible the Silvertree pack cast you out." I stiffened. "I told you, I can't shift properly. Show me." Fear gripped me. "No, I can't." "You can," he insisted, though his tone remained gentle. "I've seen many kinds of shifts, Eleanor. Nothing you show me will disgust me." I swallowed hard, my heart racing. No one had ever asked to see my shameful partial shift. They'd only witnessed it during the mandatory trials all pack members underwent at maturity. "Please," I whispered, staring at my hands. "Don't make me." He moved then, kneeling before my chair so our eyes were level. "Eleanor," he said, his voice surprisingly tender, "whatever you show me changes nothing about your place here. But I need to see. My place here. What was my place exactly?" I still didn't understand why he'd brought me to his territories, what purpose I could possibly serve for the Alpha King. But denying him wasn't an option. With trembling hands, I rose and stepped back from the chair, giving myself room. It's not pretty," I warned, a last attempt to prepare him. "Few shifts are," he replied simply. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes and reached for that part of myself I'd learned to suppress. The wolf that lived beneath my skin, but could never fully emerge. The change began as it always did, with pain radiating through my limbs as bones started to reshape themselves. My face elongated partially, teeth sharpening but not fully transforming into a wolf's muzzle. Patchy fur sprouted along my arms and neck, a pale gold that matched my hair. My fingers curved into claws, but my hands remained stubbornly human in shape. The worst part was always the halfway point where the transformation simply stopped. Frozen between forms, neither fully human nor fully wolf, I stood before him, a grotesque exhibit of failure. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, unwilling to see the disgust that must surely be written across his face. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the storm outside. Then, a gentle touch on my cheek. Raven's fingers, tracing the line where human skin met patchy fur. "Open your eyes, Eleanor," he commanded softly. I did, bracing for revulsion. Instead, I found fascination in his gaze. "Extraordinary," he murmured, continuing his careful exploration of my transformed features. "You're caught between forms. Defective." I corrected bitterly, unable to complete the shift. "No." He shook his head. "This isn't a defect. This is something else entirely." His fingers brushed over my partially elongated ear. "Does it hurt? To stay like this?" "Yes," I admitted, "if I hold it too long." "Then return," he said, stepping back to give me space. The shift back was always easier, my body grateful to return to its natural state. When I stood fully human again, I hugged myself, suddenly cold despite the fire's warmth. Raven watched me with an expression I couldn't interpret. "How long have you been shifting this way?" "Since I was 13, I answered. "When most wolves begin their first transformations. Mine just never progressed beyond this point." He turned away abruptly, pacing the length of the room. I could almost see thoughts racing behind his eyes, calculations and theories forming and discarding. "What?" I finally asked, unable to bear the suspense. "What are you thinking?" He stopped, facing me again. "I'm thinking the Silvertree pack were fools," he said bluntly, "and that their loss may be my greatest gain." Before I could ask what he meant, he continued, "You should rest. Tomorrow will bring new challenges." It was a dismissal, polite but firm. I retreated to the bedroom, questions swirling in my mind. Why had my partial shift fascinated rather than disgusted him? What had he meant about the Silvertree pack's loss being his gain? Sleep came eventually, deep and dreamless, the sleep of exhaustion finally catching up with me. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I hadn't noticed the night before. The storm had passed, leaving a world transformed by pristine white snow that glittered like diamonds in the morning light. A soft knock at the door preceded the entry of the same young woman who had brought my dinner. This time she carried a breakfast tray and a bundle of clothing. "Good morning, my lady," she greeted me with a smile. "The king requested you join him for training after you've eaten. These are for you." She laid out the clothing, riding breeches, a warm tunic, and a thick cloak lined with fur. "Training?" I echoed, confused. "Combat training," she clarified, looking surprised at my confusion. "All members of the King's Inner Circle train daily." Inner Circle? The implication sent a jolt through me. Surely she was mistaken. I was just a curiosity to Raven, not someone who belonged in his inner circle. After she left, I dressed quickly and ate, curiosity overriding my apprehension. The clothing fit perfectly, the fabric finer than anything I'd worn before. The cloak was particularly magnificent, deep blue trimmed with silver fur that matched my pendant. I found Raven in a large courtyard where a group of wolves, his elite guard, I presumed, were engaged in combat practice. Vera was among them, her movements a blur of deadly precision, as she sparred with a male twice her size. Raven spotted me immediately, breaking away from a conversation to approach. "You slept well?" he asked, his eyes taking in my appearance with obvious approval. "Yes, thank you." I glanced nervously at the training wolves. "I was told you wanted me to join. But I'm not a fighter." A small smile touched his lips. "That remains to be seen." He led me to a quieter corner of the courtyard, away from the main group. "Show me how you defend yourself." I stared at him blankly. "I don't. I run." "And if you can't run?" I shrugged helplessly. "I hide. Or I'm caught." Something dark flashed across his face. "That ends today." He took a step back, assuming a fighting stance, Try to strike me. I shook my head. I can't. You can, he insisted, and you will. Consider it payment for my hospitality. Reluctantly, I raised my hands, mimicking his stance as best I could. When I made no move to attack, he sighed. Perhaps you need motivation, he mused. If you land a single blow, I'll answer any question you wish to ask. The offer was tempting. There were so many things I wanted to know. About him. About why he'd brought me here. About what awaited me at the Winter Palace. I lunged forward awkwardly, aiming a clumsy blow at his chest. He sidestepped effortlessly, catching my wrist and using my momentum to spin me around until my back pressed against his chest. Again, he said, releasing me. But this time use your anger. I know you have it. The pack that rejected you, the wolves who called you defective, channel that rage. His words struck a chord. I did have anger, buried deep beneath layers of submission and fear. Anger at being cast aside, at being made to feel worthless, at having to survive alone in a world that had no place for me. This time when I attacked, there was more force behind it. Raven blocked me easily, but I saw approval in his eyes. Better, he encouraged. Again. We continued like this for nearly an hour, with Raven patiently correcting my form, teaching me basic defensive moves, showing me how to use my smaller size to my advantage. By the end, I was drenched in sweat despite the cold air, my muscles burning from the unaccustomed exercise. Enough for today, he finally said. You learn quickly. I collapsed onto a nearby bench, breathing hard. Did I earn my question? I asked between gulps of air. He chuckled. You didn't land a blow. You didn't say I had to succeed, I pointed out. Only that I had to try. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something like respect. Clever, he conceded. Very well. One question. I considered carefully, choosing from among the dozens that had plagued me since he'd found me in the forest. Why did you bring me here? The truth. Raven was silent for a long moment, his golden eyes revealing nothing. Finally, he sat beside me on the bench. There is a prophecy, he began, his voice low enough that only I could hear. One that has guided the rulers of the northern territories for generations. It speaks of a time of great change, when the old ways will be challenged, and the bonds between packs tested as never before. I listened, puzzled by this unexpected turn. The prophecy mentions a wolf who is not a wolf, he continued. One caught between forms, who will either unite the territories or see them fall into chaos. His eyes locked with mine. When my scouts reported finding a cast-off Omega, who shared her last meal with them during a storm, I was curious. When they described your kindness despite your own desperate situation, I was intrigued. But when I saw you myself, when I sensed something different about you. You can't possibly believe I'm part of some prophecy, I interrupted, disbelief clear in my voice. What I believe, he said carefully, is that you are unique. Your partial shift is not a defect. It's rare, yes, but not unprecedented. In ancient times, there were wolves like you, called halflings. They were revered for their ability to bridge the gap between human and wolf consciousness, to maintain human thought even in partial shift form. I shook my head. If that were true, why would my pack cast me out? Because they didn't know, he said simply. Or because they feared what they didn't understand. The knowledge of halflings has been lost to most packs for centuries. I only know of them because the royal archives contain records from before the Great Division. The Great Division, the ancient split that had created the current territorial system after a devastating war, nearly wiped out all wolfkind. It was the stuff of legends, stories told to pups around winter fires. Even if what you say is true, I said slowly, even if I am this halfling, why does it matter to you? Raven's expression grew more serious. Because the territories stand on the brink of war, Eleanor. The southern packs grow restless, resources grow scarce, and old grievances resurface with each passing season. If the prophecy is true, if you are the one it speaks of, he left the sentence unfinished. I stared at him, trying to process his words. Me, rejected, defective Eleanor, the subject of an ancient prophecy. It seemed absurd, yet the intensity in Raven's eyes spoke of absolute conviction. "You believe I can help prevent a war?" I finally managed. "I believe you might be the key to everything," he replied simply. "But first, you need to discover your own strength. That's why we train." Before I could respond, Vera approached, her expression tense. "My king," she said with a quick bow. "Scouts have returned from the southern border. The Silvertree Pack has crossed into the disputed lands. They claim to be searching for something, or someone." Raven's face hardened. "They seek Eleanor." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Why would they want me back? They cast me out. Perhaps they've reconsidered your value," Raven said, rising to his feet. "Or perhaps they've heard rumors of my interest in you and wish to know why." To Vera, he said, "Prepare to depart immediately. We ride for the Winter Palace." As he strode away to give orders, I remained frozen on the bench, my mind reeling. My former pack was looking for me. The same pack that had declared me worthless and sent me away during the worst storm of the season. What had changed? And why did the thought of them finding me fill me with such dread? We left the outpost within the hour, traveling with a larger escort than before. Raven's mood had darkened considerably since receiving the news about the Silvertree Pack, his jaw set in a hard line as we rode. "Why would they want me back?" I asked when we stopped briefly to water the horses. I was nothing to them. Raven's eyes met mine, golden and fierce. "You were never nothing, Eleanor. You were simply among those who couldn't see your worth." He adjusted the cloak around my shoulders, his touch lingering. "The question isn't why they want you back. It's why now, after casting you out during a storm and leaving you to die." The bluntness of his words made me flinch, but I couldn't deny their truth. My former pack had indeed left me to die, whether they'd admit it or not. "What will happen if they find us?" I asked, voicing the fear that had been growing since we'd left the outpost. "They won't," he assured me. "But if they did," his expression hardened, "they would be reminded why the Northern Territories have remained unconquered for centuries." We rode harder that day than before, pushing through forests and valleys blanketed with fresh snow. By nightfall, I could see a change in the landscape, more settlements, cleared roads, occasional patrols that saluted as we passed. We were deep in Raven's kingdom now. When we finally stopped to make camp, I was so exhausted I could barely dismount without assistance. Raven caught me as I stumbled, his strong arm steadying me. "Not much farther," he promised. "We'll reach the Winter Palace tomorrow." Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake in my tent, listening to the guards moving about the camp, wondering what awaited me at the palace. Would I be presented as the fulfillment of this prophecy Raven believed in? What if I failed to live up to such expectations? And always, at the edge of my thoughts, lurked the knowledge that the Silvertree Pack was searching for me, the pack that had declared me defective, worthless, now suddenly interested in reclaiming their cast-off Omega. Morning came too quickly. As we broke camp, I noticed the guards were more alert than usual, their eyes constantly scanning the forest around us. "Is something wrong?" I asked Vera, as she helped me onto Raven's stallion. She hesitated before answering. "Just a precaution. We're still in the borderlands." Before I could question her further, Raven joined us, swinging up into the saddle behind me. "Stay alert," he instructed the guards. "I want to reach the palace by midday." We rode in tense silence, the mood of the entire party shifting subtly as we moved deeper into Raven's territory. I could sense his growing impatience, the way his body seemed to lean forward slightly, as if trying to hurry our progress. Around mid-morning, the forest opened up to reveal a valley so vast it took my breath away, and there, nestled against the mountainside in the distance, stood what could only be the Winter Palace. It was more fortress than palace, a sprawling structure of gray stone and soaring towers, with walls that must have been 20 feet high. Banners bearing Raven's crest, a black raven clutching a silver key, fluttered from the battlements. "It's magnificent," I breathed. "It's home," he replied, and I caught a note in his voice I hadn't heard before. Pride, yes, but also something like relief. "And now it will be yours as well." The implications of his words sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the cold. Home. Could this imposing fortress truly become that for me, after so long feeling unwanted? Could I find belonging here? As we descended into the valley, I noticed activity along the road ahead. A group of riders approaching at speed. Raven tensed behind me. "Report!" he called to Vera, who had ridden forward to meet the approaching party. She returned quickly, her expression grave. "Silvertree Scouts, my king. They've been tracked crossing our borders to the south. Our patrols have engaged them, but some may have slipped through." Raven's arm tightened around my waist. "How far?" "Half a day's ride at most." Vera's eyes flickered to me briefly. "They're moving as if they know exactly where they're going." "They're tracking me," I realized aloud, my stomach clenching with fear. "But how?" "Blood calls to blood," Raven said grimly. "If they have a blood relation of yours with them, they could follow your scent across any distance." I shook my head. "I have no family left. My grandmother was the last. Are you certain?" His voice was tight with urgency. "Think, Eleanor. Any distant cousins? Anyone who shares your bloodline?" I started to deny it again, then hesitated as a memory surfaced. A conversation overheard years ago, my grandmother arguing with the pack alpha. "Her father's blood runs strong in her. You'll see it when she's grown." "My father," I said slowly. "I never knew him. He wasn't from our pack. My mother met him while traveling. She died when I was born, and my grandmother raised me." I turned as much as the saddle would allow, meeting Raven's intense gaze. Could he be alive? Could he be with the Silvertree pack now? "It would explain how they're tracking you with such precision." Raven's expression had turned thunderous. "We ride for the palace now. No more stops." He spurred the stallion forward, the rest of the guard falling in around us. We galloped across the valley floor, eating up the distance to the palace with desperate speed. As we drew closer, I could see that the palace was even larger than it had appeared from a distance, its stone walls gleaming with an almost bluish tint in the winter sunlight. Guards lined the battlements, and the massive iron gates stood open in anticipation of our arrival. We thundered across the bridge that spanned a deep ravine before the main gates, hooves echoing on the stone. Only when we were safely inside the palace walls did Raven's posture relax slightly. "Seal the gates," he commanded, as servants rushed forward to take our horses. "Double the watch. No one enters without my direct authorization." A tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked black hair approached, bowing deeply to Raven. "My king, welcome home. We've prepared everything as you requested. Thank you, Isolde," he replied, lifting me down from the saddle with careful hands. "This is Eleanor. She is under my personal protection." Isolde's sharp eyes assessed me quickly, revealing nothing of her thoughts. "Of course. I've prepared the East Wing chambers as you instructed." Raven nodded, then turned to me. "Isolde is my seneschal. She'll show you to your quarters and see that you have everything you need." His hand cupped my cheek briefly. "Rest. I'll come for you this evening." With that, he strode away, already deep in conversation with Vera and several other guards who had gathered around him. I followed Isolde through a series of grand hallways, trying not to gape at my surroundings. The Winter Palace was unlike anything I'd ever seen. High vaulted ceilings, intricate tapestries depicting hunting scenes and battles, polished stone floors covered with rich carpets in deep blues and silvers. "The king has been preparing for your arrival for some time," Isolde remarked as we climbed a sweeping staircase. "Though I admit, you're not what I expected." I frowned. "What do you mean, preparing? He only found me days ago." Isolde gave me a measured look. "The king has been searching for you for nearly a year, ever since the ancient texts were translated fully. The prophecy was quite specific about certain attributes. My partial shift, the wolf who is not a wolf. So it hadn't been chance that Raven's scouts had found me. They had been actively searching for someone like me. Here we are," Isolde announced, stopping before an ornately carved door. "Your chambers." She pushed the door open to reveal a suite that took my breath away. Sunlight streamed through tall windows overlooking the mountains, illuminating a sitting room with comfortable furniture arranged before a fireplace where flames already danced. Through an archway, I glimpsed a bedroom larger than the entire cottage my grandmother and I had shared. "This is..." For me? I asked, unable to keep the awe from my voice. The king was most insistent that you be comfortable, Isolde replied, a hint of a smile softening her formal demeanor. A bath has been prepared, and suitable clothing provided. The king requests your presence at dinner in his private dining hall. I'll send someone to escort you when it's time. Left alone, I explored my new quarters with growing disbelief. The bedroom contained a massive 4-poster bed, with hangings of deep blue velvet. The adjoining bathing chamber featured a sunken tub, already filled with steaming, scented water. And most astonishing of all, a dressing room filled with clothing in various shades of blue and silver, all in my size, all finer than anything I'd ever owned. It was too much to process. Just days ago, I had been cast out, alone and starving. Now I stood in chambers fit for royalty, under the protection of the most powerful alpha in the territories, all because of a prophecy, all because of my defect that wasn't a defect at all, but something rare and valuable. I sank into the bath, letting the hot water soothe my travel-weary body while my mind raced. If Raven was right, if I was this halfling mentioned in the prophecy, what did that mean for me? What was I expected to do? And what of the Silver Tree Pack, seemingly desperate to reclaim me now that I had value to someone else? After bathing, I selected a simple gown of deep blue with silver embroidery at the hem and sleeves. It fit perfectly, as though made specifically for me, which I realized it probably had been. The thought was both flattering and unsettling. How long had Raven truly been preparing for my arrival? As promised, a young servant came to escort me to dinner as twilight fell. He led me through corridors lit by ornate silver sconces, down a smaller staircase, and finally to a set of double doors guarded by 2 of Raven's elite. "The king awaits you," one guard said, opening the door for me. The private dining hall was intimate compared to the grandeur of the rest of the palace, a circular room with a domed ceiling painted to resemble a night sky, complete with twinkling stars. A table for 2 had been set before a roaring fire, candles casting a warm glow over fine silver and crystal. Raven stood as I entered, his eyes widening slightly as they took in my appearance. He had changed as well, the travel-worn leathers replaced by formal attire that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. "Eleanor," he said, my name almost a caress on his lips. "You look beautiful." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "Thank you. These rooms, these clothes, it's all too much. It's nothing less than you deserve," he replied, pulling out my chair. "Wine?" I nodded, still trying to reconcile this elegant, almost courtly Raven with the fearsome warrior who had swept me from the forest mere days ago. "Your palace is magnificent," I said as he poured dark red wine into my goblet. "It's been the seat of my family's power for 10 generations," he replied, taking his own seat across from me, though I admit it has felt empty in recent years. I sipped the wine, surprised by its rich, complex flavor. "You live here alone?" A shadow crossed his face. "My parents were killed during a border skirmish when I was 20. I have no siblings, no close family. The palace staff, my guards, they are the closest thing to family I have now." The admission surprised me. Somehow I had never considered that the Alpha King might be as alone as I was. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I know what it's like to lose those you love." His golden eyes studied me over the rim of his goblet. "Yes, I believe you do." He set down his wine. "The Silver Tree Pack crossed fully into our territory this afternoon. They'll reach the valley by tomorrow." My hand tightened around the stem of my goblet. "What will you do?" "Meet them," he said simply. "Hear what they have to say, and then remind them that you are under my protection now. And if they insist on taking me back..." The thought made my stomach clench with dread. Raven's expression hardened. "They cast you out, Eleanor. They have no claim on you now." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "I won't let them take you. Not unless it's truly what you want." The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. "Why?" I whispered. "Because of the prophecy?" "The prophecy is what led me to search for you," he acknowledged. "But it's not why I want you to stay." "Then why?" He was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of my hand. "Because in all my years as Alpha King, surrounded by those who fear me or seek my favor, I've never met anyone who would feed starving wolves during a storm with no thought of reward, because you look at me and see Raven, not just the Alpha King. Because when I'm with you, the palace doesn't feel empty anymore. His words left me speechless, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the fire or the wine. Before I could respond, a sharp knock at the door broke the moment. Vera entered, her expression urgent. "Forgive the interruption, my king, but our scouts have spotted Silvertree wolves approaching from the south. They'll reach the palace by dawn." Raven's jaw tightened. "How many?" "At least 20, including their alpha and several senior pack members." He rose from his chair, all traces of the gentle man from moments ago replaced by the Alpha King. "Prepare the Great Hall. We'll receive them formally." To me, he added, "You should rest. Tomorrow will test us all." As he strode from the room with Vera, I remained seated, the food before me forgotten. Tomorrow I would face the pack that had rejected me, and the truth about why they sought me now. Whatever happened, I knew with sudden clarity that I didn't want to return to the Silvertree pack. Somehow, in the space of a few days, this imposing fortress and its enigmatic king had begun to feel more like home than the packlands where I'd spent my entire life. I touched my grandmother's pendant, drawing strength from it as I always had. "Trust your instincts," I whispered to myself. "They're stronger than you know." And my instincts were telling me that my place was here, with Raven, whatever challenges tomorrow might bring.